Oh no, folks. It seems as if Chicago didn't really want to spend $12 to watch this preseason game in person. They didn't want to see the epic return of their number one star that got traded away coming back. I mean, these tickets were going for $7-8, $6.50 in some places.
Under the bright arena lights and a buzzing scoreboard, everything was prepared for a dramatic return as Chicago opened its doors for Angel Reese once again. Known as the self-proclaimed Chi Barbie, who had spent the past 2 years claiming she was a central force in women's basketball, she walked back into the city that first elevated her name and image. The night was framed as a defining comeback, a reset moment designed for headlines and redemption, the kind of stage where legacies are supposed to be reinforced. Yet as the moment unfolded, the expected energy never truly arrived, and the crowd that was meant to welcome her back simply wasn't there.
Watch this. Uh-oh, now look, it's our time. Listen, when Caitlin had her preseason game, y'all wanted to come put stuff in our face and clown us. Well, guess what? Now it's time for y'all to get the same treatment. So tell me why in Angel's first preseason game, and it went exactly how I told y'all it would, she shot 28% in the paint. 0% from the three-point line. Every three she threw up there, clank. And then from the free throws, she made 4 out of 8. She had 8 free throws. They was free. And she only made half of them. Pathetic.
Right from the opening tip, the reality of the game became clear long before anyone even thought about attendance numbers. Angel Reese took the floor at Wintrust Arena for the Chicago Sky's opening preseason matchup of 2026 against the Atlanta Dream, but things fell apart almost immediately. She finished the night shooting just 2 of 7 from the field, missed 4 of her 8 free throw attempts, and ended with only 8 points in a short 13-minute appearance. There's no exaggeration in the numbers. 2 made baskets, 4 missed free throws, and a stat line that was impossible to overlook. For a player who has spent the last 2 years positioning herself as the face of a franchise, a performance like that instantly pulls attention, and in Angel Reese's case, every single detail gets amplified.
She decides to let her ego get in the way. That's where she's going to be dangerous and destroy the team. And I'm being honest here because honestly, she's literally the same player from last year. She's the same player from the year before. She didn't really change that much, man. She's the same exact player, okay? As long as she can score 0 to 5 feet and don't miss layups, she will be fine. But I don't think it's the game on the court is the issue. The issue is, will she be willing to accept a role player position? If she accepts it, she will be fine. If she don't, there's going to be huge problems. This is going to be called Atlanta nightmare afterwards. I'm telling you, that's what it is. It's going to come down to that. Is she willing to accept her role? Because I said this before and I got hated for it.
Following a heavily publicized offseason move to the Atlanta Dream, the matchup was presented as Angel Reese's highly anticipated debut against her former team. The situation already carried added weight, with her returning to the same building where she had previously been suspended, now facing an organization she had openly clashed with, in a game that Chicago had every reason to watch closely. Everything was set up for drama, headlines, and a packed arena ready to absorb every moment of it. Yet the city seemed to respond before the opening tip ever came. Inside Wintrust Arena, around 3,000 seats sat empty, creating a noticeable silence in a venue that was supposed to be charged for exactly this kind of night.
Now, if I had to take a guess, behind the baskets, they said, you guys don't need to sit here. Let's actually file you in to the hundreds, to the 100 sections, and we'll move you towards center court. So on TV, it actually looks like there's more people in the building than it actually is. So I'm assuming that behind this backboard, you see that it's empty. The upper deck, you see that it's empty. But I would also assume that behind the basket that we're getting this camera angle from, it is empty, and the upper deck is empty. If I had to take a guess, 1,500 people in the building? Maybe 1,500?
The reaction online was immediate, as it always is when moments like this play out in real time. Within an hour of tip-off, photos and clips of rows of empty seats were circulating across X, TikTok, and Reddit, quickly igniting debates everywhere. The comment sections lit up with reactions: 3,000 empty seats for Angel Reese's return, paired with a 2-for-7 shooting night. And for many, that contrast seemed to say it all. Some were genuinely shocked, while others claimed they saw it coming from the start. But regardless of perspective, the visual itself was impossible to dispute. Empty seats don't adjust for narratives or shield reputations. They reflect what is actually there. And on April 29th in Chicago, those 3,000 vacant chairs carried a message that echoed well beyond the walls of the arena.
It's been a while, and I'm sure you came back to a sellout crowd that could not wait to see you, or not. Only 6,724 fans showed up to the Wintrust Arena. Yeah, it holds about 9,500 fans, so we're talking roughly 3,000 fans away from being sold out, to see the return of Angel Reese and the...
This is where the situation starts to look more layered, because it wasn't an isolated moment. It was part of a pattern that had already begun to surface. Going back to May 2025, Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky took part in a preseason exhibition at the Pete Maravich Assembly Center at LSU, her former college home, and the arena where she had once captured a national championship and risen to national prominence. Even with the emotional weight of that return, the upper level of the arena was never opened, as the lower bowl itself failed to fill. Tickets were being resold for as little as $11 to $15, yet significant sections still sat empty, and the images from that night quickly spread across social media, continuing to circulate long after the final buzzer. A similar scenario appeared again in 2026, this time in Chicago, where turnout issues once more became part of the discussion in her home market. While Reese publicly expressed gratitude for her opportunities, appreciation for the fans in attendance, and confidence in her journey with the team, the broader picture around her career was already forming into something harder to overlook, with a growing sense that a pattern was emerging. When her 2025 season ultimately concluded, it ended on a disappointing note, as the Chicago Sky finished 10-34, missed the playoffs for a second straight year, and stood among the lower tier of teams in the league, marking a difficult stretch for a franchise that had entered the period expecting to compete at a much higher level after building her into a central part of their future. The team's struggles on the court were only one part of the bigger picture, because off the floor the situation grew even more complicated. Angel Reese, in a Chicago Tribune interview, suggested that the organization needed major roster upgrades or she might reconsider her long-term future with the team, a statement that immediately triggered a strong response from the franchise. The Sky ultimately suspended her and described the comments as harmful to team cohesion, turning a mid-season disagreement into a defining organizational moment. That type of internal suspension over public criticism is never just a footnote. It becomes part of the narrative that follows a player. The situation carried into the offseason and was eventually followed by her move to the Atlanta Dream. Additional reports also indicated that Reese questioned whether certain teammates were capable of leading a playoff-level team and believed the roster required a significant reshaping around a small core group, including herself and Camila Cardoso. She voiced frustration with the season's outcome, stressed the need for higher-level talent, and acknowledged that while she preferred to remain long-term, she would consider other options if conditions did not improve. By the time the 2026 preseason arrived, she was back in Chicago wearing Atlanta colors, and the storyline around her had only widened, shaped by her departure, the suspension, and the lingering questions left behind from her time with the Sky. Beneath all of it, however, remained the most consistent criticism of her game since her rookie year, her shooting efficiency and her difficulty finishing around the rim, an aspect that analysts continue to highlight regardless of her rebounding numbers or defensive impact, with ongoing debate about how many of those rebounds come from her own missed shots rather than second-chance opportunities created by the team, forming a statistical profile that becomes more nuanced the deeper it is examined. Concerns about Angel Reese's rebounding have long been part of a wider debate about how those numbers are actually produced. Since her rookie season, analysts and fans have repeatedly noted that while her rebounding totals look strong on paper, a significant share comes from her own missed shots being recovered rather than from securing traditional second-chance opportunities created by teammates, and that distinction has become central to how her production is interpreted beyond the box score. A widely discussed example of this came during a May 2025 game against the New York Liberty, where one sequence drew major attention. Reese missed 8 field goal attempts, but still finished with 12 rebounds, including 5 offensive boards collected in just a 19-second span, all coming directly off her own misses in a rapid cycle around the rim. That stretch spread quickly across social platforms and became a reference point in ongoing discussions about her game, as analysts, commentators, and viewers used it to illustrate the gap between raw rebounding totals and the efficiency behind them. While the numbers themselves remain valid, the way they are accumulated has continued to add layers to her evaluation. That moment never fully left the conversation, and when Reese shot 2 of 7 from the field against the Sky on April 29th, while also missing 4 free throws, the same discussions resurfaced immediately. She still finished with 8 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 steals, a stat line that on the surface could be read as a solid all-around performance, but the shooting inefficiency told a different story that quickly became the main focus again, especially as online reactions broke down the numbers in detail without hesitation. What keeps the shooting conversation so persistent is not the volume of attempts but the type of opportunities being missed. The criticism is not focused on difficult shot creation or low-percentage perimeter looks, but instead keeps returning to close-range finishes, layups, and free throws, the kinds of chances expected to be automatic for a player with her size and physical profile. Standing at 6 feet 3 inches with notable strength and athletic ability, finishing at the rim is supposed to be a foundation of her game, yet it continues to be the most scrutinized part of her offensive output. Across game after game and preseason after preseason, the pattern remains the same. Her rebounding and defensive impact are acknowledged, but the discussion repeatedly circles back to missed shots, and when inefficiency becomes the dominant storyline after a performance, it shifts perception from totals to execution. At the same time, there are still moments within games where she does make an impact on both ends, grabbing rebounds, converting putbacks, and drawing contact at the rim to earn free throws, showing that her physical presence continues to translate into production in certain areas even when her offensive rhythm is inconsistent. But the attention quickly drifted back to the broader context of the night, especially the 3,000 empty seats that were impossible to overlook. The low turnout in Chicago didn't appear out of nowhere. It reflected a build-up over time, shaped by a difficult 10-34 season with limited success, a publicly visible suspension that created tension with the organization, and an eventual departure that felt less like a clean separation and more like the closing of a strained chapter. All of that history was still present in the background, and it clearly influenced how the return was received. So, when a large portion of the local crowd did not show up for a heavily promoted preseason game, it represented more than a single moment of absence. It echoed everything that had already unfolded leading into it. The question was not whether the return was noticed, but how it was interpreted in light of what came before. Meanwhile, the broadcast itself continued to reinforce familiar patterns from her games, with possessions defined by missed drives, close-range attempts that don't convert, and stretches where efficiency issues stand out more than the box score production, creating a parallel narrative where both the action on the floor and the empty seats in the arena seem to be telling the same story from different perspectives. A 28% shooting night, along with 7 rebounds and 2 assists, set the statistical outline of the performance, but the wider conversation around Angel Reese stretches well beyond a single box score. Within the same 2025 WNBA season, defined for Chicago by a 10-34 record, a mid-season suspension, and a second consecutive year missing the playoffs, other franchises were operating in a very different competitive and commercial environment. The Indiana Fever, for instance, were expanding into larger venues as demand consistently exceeded available seating, while across the league teams like the Atlanta Dream, Connecticut Sun, and Dallas Wings also moved select games into NBA-sized arenas to meet rising attendance, reflecting broader growth in fan engagement in multiple markets. Looking ahead to the 2026 season, projections indicated that 39 of the Indiana Fever's 44 regular season games would be played in NBA-level arenas, highlighting the scale of expansion in certain regions and documenting attendance trends at a structural level. In contrast, the discussion around Reese's transition into a new team environment has centered on adjustment, expectation, and development. As she has acknowledged the support of teammates and coaching staff, the confidence placed in her role, and the ongoing need to refine shot selection and offensive decision-making at the professional level, particularly in areas of efficiency that continue to draw consistent attention. As the new season begins in Atlanta, attention naturally turns toward how our game will adapt within a different system and environment, even as the past season's struggles, suspension, and surrounding external noise remain part of the backdrop rather than the present moment. In professional sports, those experiences do not simply fade, they carry forward as context into every new chapter, shaping how players are viewed and what is expected of them, and the central question moving ahead becomes less about narrative and more about whether performance can begin to align more consistently with those expectations over time. Right now, both the on-court outcomes and the broader arena reactions are becoming increasingly intertwined in the public conversation, with the shooting concerns remaining the most discussed aspect of her offensive game not because of isolated moments, but because of a recurring pattern across multiple games where efficiency continues to be tested as defenses adjust and opportunities become harder to replicate, reinforcing the idea that at this level development is defined by sustained consistency rather than flashes, and that an offensive profile cannot rely heavily on repeated second-chance situations from missed attempts without eventually impacting overall efficiency, making the ability to convert initial finishes more reliably a key factor in translating production into stable, winning contributions over time. At the same time, the attendance figure in Chicago on April 29th has now become part of a much wider conversation, not because it defines a fan base or determines the course of an entire season, but because it reflects how performance, perception, and engagement often intersect in professional sports. The 3,000 empty seats were not tied to any single explanation such as scheduling, weather, or promotional timing, but are instead frequently interpreted as the result of a longer buildup of context, team results, public narratives, roster changes, and past seasons all influencing how fans ultimately respond in real time. Whether seen as disengagement, frustration, or simply a shift in interest, that absence turned into another visible data point in how the game was experienced and understood. In this way, on-court performance and in-arena turnout begin to mirror each other, with statistical output and attendance both acting as different forms of feedback that shape the same overall picture, one defined by outcomes, reception, and how both continue to evolve within the same competitive landscape. If you want more deep breakdowns like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next analysis.